Well, thank you for all your comments on the slang and different, shall we say, the nice word, colloquialisms, obviously, that get in the way of having good communication, because people just don't know what the heck they mean. And a lot of the time, even as we use those expressions, we actually don't know what they mean. So I started looking at different expressions that I've learned and thought were quite clever along the way. Of course, in many ways, the more, shall we say, eloquent or stylish ways of saying something else or implying something else go to the Americans. And for them, we can thank them for collateral damage, which is a way of saying killing innocent people. But they also invented many different ways of saying things, which are wonderful. There's so many things to talk about on this. I'll never get through it all. Probably have to make several videos because it's a fascinating subject, and it's one that we all use these ways of speaking, and we think that it's proper English, but it's not. It's just what we've what we've evolved into doing. For instance, being economical with the truth is telling a lie. But if you are in the UK, you would say a pork pie. But the way that you'd say it would be, oh, that's a porky pie. So there's just so many things. So I've written some of them down, and some of them I won't actually be able to say because the AI, the great god of AI, will be listening, watching, and they'll probably ban the video, which they've done before when I tried to talk about the A and the I, and suggest that things are not as they seem. They actually pulled the video. They deleted it. So some of the things I won't be able to say, but I will use some of the perhaps what many would think of as locker room talk. Everybody nowadays says shit, so I won't be dancing around that one. But the N word would get. If I said the N word, it would mean that I would be deleted and probably put in prison. Facebook and YouTube have that, and I was imprisoned recently for suggesting that there are people out there that have stories about being cured for a certain C word, and it was deemed to be fake news. Well, anyway, one of the subjects which are actually strewn with different sayings and different ways of saying the same thing. My brother was a master at those things. He would call anybody that was even slightly effeminate, he would say, he's a big girl's blouse. A big girl's blouse. And he would also say, yeah, he sits down to piss. Meaning that actually it's so strange, because a little while ago I did see that the powers that be were trying to suggest that men, instead of going to a stand-up urinal, should actually sit down when they go and pee. Yeah, right. Well, yes. So it arrives at what you do when you go there, or in the privacy of your own room. So for masturbation, there are so many different ways of saying it, and I wrote some of them down. Going to the toilet was a favourite expression that I picked up in Australia, where they would say pointing Percy at the porcelain. So they point Percy at the porcelain. But as soon as it gets on to masturbation, then you have what has now, I think, become a universal one of a wanker. So what does a wanker do? Well, he would in the UK he would describe it as bashing the bishop or pulling the plonker. And if you watch Only Fools and Horses, you'll see that between the characters, Rodney, the stand-up young boy, or as he was then, would often be called a plonker. He would say, "You plonker." Anyway, what's another one? Hand-reared. Someone who has one of a certain size, I'd say, oh yeah, that one's hand-reared. And going steady with his fist, shaking hands with his best friend. And then, of course, there's always the story of the guy that gets, as a boy, he's talking about how his mother caught him masturbating, and she comes in and she says, "You'll go blind doing that." Well, he enjoys doing it, so he says to his mom, "Well, can I just do it a bit and wear glasses?" Anyway, also, it would be one off the wrist, and then the posh one would be self-gratification. Yes. Now, as soon as you go to London, you come into a whole different language, most of which I don't know, but a lot of which I unknowingly, without thinking, often used to use. Now, so in London, they have what's called rhyming slang. And this is in the south of England, London, very much the south. And they call themselves Southerners in the same way that I would call myself a Northerner. So rhyming slang is that they have a whole series of phrases which start out as a full thing and then get shortened down. So for a wig, if somebody wore a wig, the sarcastic way of describing it would be was something that they used to use when they were advertising the use of a wig. Now, in those days, nobody wanted to be known as wearing a wig, which they called, by the way, an Irish jig wig. And then it would get shortened to Irish, and they say, "Ah, nice Irish." And then as a sarcastic thing taken from, I think, the advert, they'd say, "Yes, it's really good. You can't see the join." So another way of describing the hair, which is to do with the wig, is to call it a barnet fair. Barnet fair rhyming with hair. But in the end, it would be barnet. So if you wanted to refer to a guy's hair, you say, "Oh, nice barnet, nice barnet." And it would get shortened to barnet, in the same way that you wouldn't say, "Oh, and he's wearing an Irish jig." You'd say, "That's an Irish." And then you'd follow up with saying, "Can't see the join." So you go on, and as I say, the rhyming slang, the Cockney rhyming slang, is used a lot, but people don't know that they're using the rhyming slang and don't know the whole phrase sometimes. See, so if you said that a girl had a nice face, you could refer to it in secret and say, "Yes, nice boat race." So instead of saying face, you say boat race, and sometimes boat. Well, there are so many different ways with these phrases, which became known and became what they call standing jokes. If my mother was talking about someone who had an other woman, they wouldn't refer to it as the other woman. They'd refer to it as his piece or his fancy piece. She'd say, yes, well, that's his fancy piece. But the comedians would say, yes, I'm going away for a couple of weeks for a bit of peace and quiet. I found the peace, I hope she keeps quiet. Bada boom. So the boat race. Now, another phrase that we use, and we don't actually think about what the true meaning is, but we would say, if we would say that something was indeterminate, that you couldn't quite make up your mind, you'd say, yeah, well, it's neither here nor there. It's neither here nor there. So another from the north of England as well, that my sister-in-law used on my brother was when they were talking, if he'd forgotten to do something, she would say to him, you'd forget your head if it was loose. To which he would reply, don't worry about me, love, my head's screwed on. And she would leap in as quick as a gazelle and say, yes, well, I think it could do with another stern. Where's the others? My mother used to describe somebody, usually another kid, if I was having trouble with another kid, she'd say, he's got no arse in his trousers. So it's difficult to say what these things come from. Obviously, the easy one to work out was the one that came from America, which was dirt poor. And someone said, rightly said, that's easy one, an easy one to work out. And then he gave another meaning to the one that I would thought. Since I came to the Philippines, I've learned what I think is the best way of describing what dirt poor means, because in a nipa house, for the section that is not raised off the ground, that will be where the bedrooms are, raised off the ground, on like the 2-foot stilts. And if there was a part that was actually where the floor was on the ground, it wouldn't have proper flooring, it wouldn't have a concrete floor. In some cases where the homeowners have built a house, they will not allow any concrete work if they don't own the land. Sometimes when we built a house for the poor, the stipulation would be it must be off the ground, because they don't want any concrete structures on that land, because they may ask the people to move. So the floor would be the ground, and that's where dirt poor really comes in, that they are so poor that they can't afford a flooring. So it's dirt, and it's hard packed, and it's swept clean every day. So what else have we got? I'm trying to, there's all kinds of other things which are more obvious, like a blabbermouth. Well, if someone is a blabbermouth, it's obvious what they are, that they have no control over their mouth, and they just speak. And in Ireland, if a person was, well, what shall we say, use the, see, this is a problem. As soon as you start to try to explain one saying, you find yourself using another. So when you say blabbermouth, if someone is a blabbermouth and it's of really important stuff, then in America they'd call him a snitch, wouldn't they? Or if he was telling on somebody, he would be a stool pigeon. So some of these things I actually can't really give a good definition of them, and I look forward to hearing what you say. How did they arrive at a stool pigeon, right? Which they would then call a stoolie, right? Now the other thing what they would call them would be snitch. Now in the problems between the Irish and the English government, the British, which has now become British. Not everybody in England refers to themselves as British. When I was a working musician, I was working in a band that toured all over England, Ireland, and Scotland. Not so much Ireland, but I think we did do one gig on the Isle of Man, which is that tiny little island between Ireland and the mainland, England. But I'm sure that if we went to Ireland, no one would be calling themselves British there. They'd be calling themselves Irish, and proudly so. Now I say this, I'm not Irish born, but my heritage is Irish, and I think my parents, my mum and dad, they would have been born in England, so they would be first generation English, and I would be second generation English. But I think that my grandparents, who actually have no real memory of, were Irish, and came over as immigrants into England, which was very common at that time. Now back to a blabbermouth. If a blabbermouth was caught giving important information to the English when the Irish, the IRA, the Independent Republic of Ireland, their rebel warriors, it's okay to say that now, but in all that happened back then, in what people in Ireland and England call the Troubles, so many atrocities were committed on both sides, and I don't make light of that at all, but just for a moment give you a piece of information that in the modern day movie industry, they've taken a real life thing, which was a terrible punishment for anybody who was a snitch, a stool pigeon, a blabbermouth, a spy, a traitor in Ireland. They've taken that punishment and they made it a thing about the character that was called the Joker. In the last most telling version of the Joker has his mouth extended up into here. So all of this is loose flesh. Hence, I guess, the idea of a blabbermouth. It's all going like that. So, a blabbermouth. Now, the IRA had an instant karma thing for people who betrayed them. They would take, it's not a nice thought, but the person would have to submit to the knife, and they would put the knife in, and they'd rip it down like this, which is what you see when you look at the Joker. And even on Facebook now, somebody's taken the Joker to be like a mentor to us all, and give these advisory things about never trust this person or that person or some other success thing for life, and you have this terrible clown face with the cuts there. But that was a way that the IRA had of almost like imprinting or tattooing the word traitor or snitch across the forehead, which actually was another way of punishing a rapist, would be to tattoo a rapist across here. And there was a famous movie actually, and at one time they used to brand a person here, and the main character, of course, who had been punished even when he was innocent, and that was his rebellious thing, and he comes back to clear his good name. But what he did was he had he had a piece of, he wore a headband which went across the head like this, and he made it into I'm using a ruler here, but he had the headband which came across, and it was a little stylish thing that was his, but it concealed the letter R. He wasn't a rapist. No, that wouldn't do, would it? We couldn't be manipulated into being sympathetic to someone who was a rapist, but it was there. And if you watched the what was it called, the Inglorious Bastards or something like that, a movie that was made about a group of soldiers that were sent in, I think, behind enemy lines, and they were totally without rules, and they, in the one particular scene, Brad Pitt makes sure that they've been told in the movie, they've been told that they mustn't kill this one particularly bad Nazi who was responsible for doing terrible things to people. And Brad Pitt, in his character, wasn't going to let this man go, because he said, you can't, I think he says, you can't kill me, I'm protected, and you've been ordered to keep me alive. And so he gets the knife and he says, yes, we have. And he puts a big N for Nazi, which will scar terribly, to make sure that the man never completely lives it down. So that's got a little bit off on the Irish thing, but it's something that is obvious when you do this in Ireland, when they would then go to hospital and they'd have it stitched up, and back then they were not given plastic surgery to conceal all of that, and the scar would be terrible, and they would be scarred for life as being someone who betrayed, in the mindset of the Irish, of the IRA, he would be branded a traitor for the rest of his life, because the scars would be terrible and everybody would know why. Okay, so there were lots of things which I could have gone into, which we just don't have time for. Perhaps we'll do another one. I look forward to hearing whether you're from whatever country you're in, as long as we understand it, that's in English. I would love to hear some of the phrases that you have, and if you have any better definitions for the things that I've tried to explain, I would love to hear them. You know, we never got on to the N-word. One of the movies which had a great effect on me at the time was Roots. I was completely ignorant about just how badly people were treated back then, and that series of Roots, and the hero of the movie goes back and seeks his heritage, and you may remember, I remember his name was Kunta Kinte, and even though back then they were heavily indoctrinated into forgetting their heritage, but he refused to give up his memory of his name, and he said, I am Kunta Kinte. And I remember the particularly moving moment when he goes back to Africa and he is about to leave, and he's getting on the boat, and he has failed to find any of his relatives. And then his cousin finds him before he steps on the boat. Very touching. So that, and if you shy away from the N-word, you should go back and look at Mark Twain. Mark Twain was a pilot on the Mississippi, which was the most fantastic river, and of course still is. But then Mark Twain gives a description of life on the river as a pilot. So all of these big paddle steamers, they had a captain, of course, who was in charge of the boat. But in order to navigate certain sections of the river, there would be a pilot, and the pilot would be in the wheelhouse. And Mark Twain was a pilot, and he wrote the most incredible book on his adventures as a pilot on the Mississippi. And of course, Mark Twain wrote of the history of America when the N-word was just another word to describe a terrible situation and a description of a whole people. But nevertheless, it was there, and it was a word. A little bit like shit has become a word. We haven't lost the meaning of it, but it's gone on to something else. Well, I've gone way over time, as I usually do, but I hope you've enjoyed the discussion, one-sided as it is. And don't forget to like, comment, and please subscribe, because if you subscribe, it means that we will be noticed by the algorithms, the great God algorithm, and what a subscriber says described as algorithm. Okay, thank you for that, and bye for now.